Welcome back to Corporate Nitro.
Corporate Nitro.
Hyper 10 Pro Nitro 110 scale touring car. It's 8:30 p.m. at night, but I've got to feed my vintage Nitro RC addiction. We're going to pick up Hobao Hyper 10 Nitro touring car. All the metals and aluminiums are going to get cleaned with kerosene. Fuel tank probably going to go in the plastics. All the plastics, anything that's plastic, foam, is going to get cleaned in hot water with detergent. Anything that's got rubber like O-rings, there's O-rings in the shocks, O-rings in the backplate, O-rings in the carb, so we have to be careful with those. We don't want them to swell, so we're not going to use kerosene or WD-40. We're going to use WD-40 silicone spray, okay, which has got nothing to do with water displacement. It's just a silicone spray, so we'll clean that with a spray and a toothbrush. All the bearings are going into alcohol, okay, so we're getting the dirt out. We'll hit it with the electric toothbrush and then we'll re-oil those up. I've also got the button head with the glow plug in there, a one-way bearing for the pull start, and a couple other pieces that I actually didn't want kerosene or WD-40 touching, so we're just using alcohol. So after the epoxy has set, 24 hours later, resting on a black nitrile glove, you can just peel it off. It always peels off, very nice. Then you just trim off the excess, and the part will be very strong. The Hobao Hyper 10 Pro is missing one of the tie rods for the steering. It's got one on this side, but it hasn't got one on this side. So I'm just going through my Kyosho parts box. I've got lots of parts for an RB6 two-wheel drive buggy, and I found this, and it's actually already on the correct length. So what we'll do is we'll just take out the balls from here, and so we can connect it straight on to the Hyper 10. So I'll use my 110 scale shock pliers. Let's get that in there. Okay, we got one ball out. Had to take the rear diff out, had it in backwards. Still got some leakage from the diff, might have to order some O-rings, and I've got to pull this whole thing apart again. So you got a one-way in here. But this one spins both ways freely. I guess it's not engaged until you hit a particular RPM. The spring's holding the pawl in. Once the RPMs overpowers the spring, the pawl will come out with centripetal force and then it'll engage. But in the meantime, just this one-way bearing is engaging. This is a pulley tensioner, and I actually want to push it further on, but I can't get it further on, so what I'll do is I'll take it all apart. Slide that in. Start tightening. Had to pull the Hyper 10 Pro apart again. The front and rear diffs are leaking silicon fluid. Turns out that the O-rings were swollen. So these are 22mm O-rings. On the right, we've got the original ones that are swollen. And then we've got the brand new ones that I ordered from China. So you can see that they're much smaller. So I'm not going to actually put any more silicone oil. I'm just going to use some automotive grease for bearings. That way we don't get any more leaks. And I will leave a little bit of silicone fluid in the diffs that's remaining, that didn't leak out. And hopefully these O-rings keep it in there. Also, something else I wanted to mention. I have had one car where the steering servo wire has been sliced by very sharp aluminium chassis pieces. Carbon fiber is very sharp as well. So what I've done is I've just put a little bit of black foam in the gap and glued that foam in. That way the wire is not rubbing on the very sharp carbon fiber edges. It's just touching the foam only. So much binding in these belts and diffs and whatever that it feels like the brakes are on, but the brakes are not on. Now the Hyper 10's got a couple of problems. Besides not wanting to roll very easily, and I think it's the rear belt, because it's just so tight. But it might not be. It might be the brake assembly. I'm not sure. But one thing I noticed with the brake assembly, it's definitely, we've got one of the rotors rubbing on the flywheel. And the reason I can tell is because the flywheel is worn out on the inside, and it should never be worn there. So definitely there's rubbing there. That's a really bad design. And if I tighten up this screw here, it's just going to push the rotor even closer to the flywheel. What a terrible design. Alright, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I've worked out why there was a lot of binding. It was probably a combination of the brakes and also these screws clamping the diff housing from the side. So I've loosened up all the screws on this side, all the screws on this side, and it seems to be a lot freer now. Let's work on the next issue. We bought a $6 pull start from AliExpress, but the screws that came with it are a little bit too long. So we're going to look for some 2.5mm screws that just aren't as long. And luckily for me, I've got a real cheap WL Toys screw kit. There might be something in here. Alright, so we're not going to use the WL Toys screws because they're Phillips head. We're just going to go with the original screws that are too long. But I've got a bag of 1mm plastic washers. They cost me next to nothing. So we're just going to load up heaps of washers on there. And that way it doesn't touch the engine blocks. I've had to put some different wheels on with foams because the ones that came with the Hyper 10 were just binding up too much. They're definitely not the original wheels. So now we've got the foams on. They're great, much less resistance. With this Kyosho linkage that I put on here on the right side, because that was missing, that's the original. And you can see a bit of copper wire there where I've done a repair. That's rubbing on the foam. So I'm going to get my high-speed rotary tool out now, this one here, with the grinding tip. We're going to grind down a bit of that plastic. We are just about to do the first start. I've connected the fuel lines. We can probably glue this back on later, but I won't glue it on now, it'll just fall off again. Okay, did we flood it? Brand new pull start. Whoa. We've got a leaky fuel tank. Trying to work out why my fuel tank is leaking. So I pulled the O-ring out and it cracked. I mean, it's completely hard, there's no flex in it whatsoever. So we need to try and replace this because it won't do the job, and having some trouble finding an O-ring that is fuel safe in that size. You can buy a new tank for $10 US from the Hobao website. However, that's not how we really do things here at Corporate Nitro. We like to fix things for free. waited months for these O-rings to arrive. We waited so long that I asked for a refund and AliExpress gave me the refund. I ordered them again from the same seller. They arrived, and then shortly after they arrived, the original ones that I ordered, they arrived. So now I've got double the O-rings that I need. Well, the new O-ring seems to grab on to the lid really good. So I guess the next part is attach the breather plate. Okay, bad news with the 20mm O-ring. It's not making any seal at all. I got no resistance. Even if I do up the screw to squeeze the O-ring and make the O-ring bigger, it still doesn't touch. So I've measured it again, and it seems like 20 was always going to be too small. It needed to be around 21. Okay, so if we look when it starts hitting, okay, so it's closer to 21 is what it needs to be. So maybe I can try a 22, but I'm thinking that's too thick. So then maybe I can go to a 21, which is correct. But will it be too tight in the middle? We'll find out soon. So we're having more luck with this one. 2.4mm cross section, 21mm outside diameter, which equates to about 16mm or 16.2mm internal diameter. So let's get this one on. What a shame we had this one the whole time and didn't realize that that was the best fit. Let's get it on and see if it makes a good seal. All right, we're just removing the engine on the Hyper 10 because I've realized that we haven't finished the fuel tank now that we've fixed the O-ring on the lid, put a new O-ring in, but it's very hard to get this fuel tank back on with the spring while the engine is there because we can't get the fuel tank out. So it's quicker to just remove the whole engine so we can get good access to the tank. We put some glue on this little plastic piece here, stop it falling off. We've put the spacers back in the front shocks because the ride height was just terrible. The chassis was touching the ground. We've made a little foam piece here so that the body doesn't rub, and put in the pins in the body posts. So all these little finishing touches. What else? We're going to see what battery will fit here. A life battery, of course, now that I'm using life batteries. Maybe the little 850. So yeah, all these little finishing touches so we can give this thing a test once and for all. Good news, we got the little pin back in the lid of the fuel tank. We found some smaller O-rings to mount the fuel tank screws, and those O-rings will help stop a bit of vibration, stop the fuel bubbling up, causing potential air bubbles. So now it's just a matter of putting the engine back in, and then we can start doing some wiring here. The chassis is starting to take shape now because we've got all the things that would make a car. The only thing that's not in here is the receiver battery pack, but that's neither here nor there. What we need to do now is get this completely sickening Nitro Gang approved JDM Skyline R34 GTR body shell and start mounting it and work out if we're going to cut out a hole for the engine in the back, work out what ride height we need to do front and rear with some body pins, work out how many cooling holes we're going to put in the front without killing it. Alright, so we've mounted the body on. It seems like it just fits. There's just enough room in the front for a couple body clips. We've got some decent ground clearance, both the chassis and the body. We can have a look there. There's definitely some ground clearance all the way. I've got nice room here in the wheel arches. Looks like that might rub a little bit when we turn left, but we'll find out. Whoever cut this didn't do it too even, but it's good enough. We've got some nice ride height there in the front as well. The exhaust stinger is right there, but it's actually deflecting down, so it's okay. It's not just hitting the poly shell. We are using the body reamer. You can see 2, 4, 6 holes I've started there. So we're going to keep going with the body reamer and go all the way. Do these holes here as big as we can just by putting the reamer in and twisting. And look how sharp this thing is. It will just cut the body. It's not a drill, it's just very sharp. Why did the duck cross the road? Because there was a Hyper 10 Nitro Touring Car on the other side. With the AA pack, it just slides into the hole here, but since we're using a Lifey pack, it's much smaller. It's going to slide around everywhere. So I'm going to use some fiber tape from my racing days and just wrap the whole thing in there, and also try and keep some of these spare cables out of the way. First test of the Hyper 10 Nitro Touring Car, Hyper 10 Pro with a Skyline, with no body cutouts yet, but we will get to that. Let's put some fuel in, and we've just put the Life battery pack in and some fiber tape to keep it in there. Damn, I lost the exhaust hanger. It's just come right out. Alright, let's jump on the bike and see if we can go and find that exhaust hanger. Yeah, I found a coat hanger in the street, so I've just cut it up with the pliers, and now I've measured up a little piece that I'm going to use, a bit of rusty coat hanger. As it turns out, the coat hanger was too thick, but I found a roll bar spare, so I've bent it and snapped it with the pliers, so it's a bit thinner. It should be able to get through that little hole there. Great news, we've bent the spare stabilizer bar just the right amount, filed down the edges, screwed it in with blue Loctite, and it's looking really good. So we've got a pipe hanger once again.